Welcome, everyone. We're just about to get started. My name is Celine, and I am a program specialist with the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. The Denver Museum of Nature and Science is pleased to partner with the International Institute for Indigenous Resource Management and the Denver American Indian Commission to present Indigenous film series. This free series is usually held at the museum, but we are so glad to have you all joining us virtually for the discussion of the film White Lies. Before we begin, I just wanted to let you all know that we will have a Q&A portion of the session where we'll ask you all to send us questions via that chat feature in Zoom. You might not be able to see each other's chats, but our wonderful panel here will be able to see them. Without further ado, to begin tonight's program, I'll hand things off to Jean Rubin from the International Institute for Indigenous Resource Management.
Thank you. Good evening. Hello to everybody. It was kind of fun to see everybody saying where they were from. I got a lot of friends on tonight, so thank you, and a lot of folks we don't know yet. So glad you could join us. I want to acknowledge the three partners for this Indigenous film series. The Denver Museum of Nature and Science, the Denver American Indian Commission, and our International Institute for Indigenous Resource Management. And thanks to all the hard work of the museum, we can bring this program to you virtually. We are also going to have this year's Indigenous Film and Arts Festival as a virtual program. We will kick it off on October 14th on this platform at the museum. So you can keep an eye on the museum website and on our institute website for updates on the annual Film Fest. For tonight's program, White Lies, is sponsored by our monthly Indigenous film sponsors. Mile High Behavioral Healthcare is our series sponsor, and Kuvo Jazz Radio is our media sponsor. So our thanks to them for making the program possible. I am going to turn the program over to Merv Tano. He's our Institute president, and he is going to introduce Maury Love, our other presenter. So he's just going to zoom me out of the picture here and zoom himself in. All right, Merv,
okay.
Take it away.
Hi, I'm Merv Tano, and joining us will be Maury Love, longtime colleague, longtime friend, and longtime director on the board of the International Institute for Indigenous Resource Management, who is joining us from New Zealand, Aotearoa. I love this film for several different reasons. One is we really love the person who wrote this, the novella upon which this film is based. He was an early supporter of the Institute, and we love his work. For folks who might recall, Whitty was here with Whale Rider. I also love this film because, as is the case with so many of these Indigenous films that are part of this monthly series, and also as part of the Institute's annual film festival. It's a multi-textured, a multi-layered film. It's a story, a narrative piece that speaks to issues of identity, perhaps cultural suppression, but it also takes place in a geopolitical atmosphere or environment that's fraught with change, with challenges to traditions, challenges on how to meld the new with the old, and how to do it in a way that is, shall we say, peaceful, that's collaborative, and that is not a situation where it is a kind of a manifestation of the hegemonic exercise by the colonial powers. So this is taking place, the story takes place in New Zealand in a situation like that. It also is a story of justice. It is a story of the connection of people with place, the almost inextricable bond for Native peoples between place and self. And with that, I'd like to introduce Maury, who's muted right now, to speak to some of those issues, geopolitical and otherwise.
Kia ora tātou, kia ora Merv, Jean, everybody. Greetings to you from a remote part of Aotearoa. The nearest town is called Tuakiri. I think it's about 2,000 people. It's in the top of the South Island, so part of the South Island projects up above the North Island, and so I live there in the middle of the bush, as it were. So, so this film really speaks. It's deceivingly complex, and as Merv has said, there's a you know, there are a number of themes that run through the whole film. Although it's called White Lies, that's a political name, and to some extent, in my view. The novella that Witi Himaira wrote was called Medicine Woman. So I guess in part, one of the underlying themes, and it becomes more than underlying, but it's the notion of traditional medicine and practice in the this is in the latter part, set in the latter part of the 19th century, with colonization sort of starting in and around 1840. So it's you know, there's still a strong colonial influence, and this particular part of the country held strongly, and it still does today, with Māori tradition, and all of the matters associated with that, te reo, the language, tikanga, the practices, and so some of these things that you see there are still practiced today, but but underlying that is the political side of the use of Māori medicine and practice, and we'll come to that later about what was called the Tohunga Suppression Bill, and this notion of quackery. I think you'll probably be familiar with that term, and apologies for the Māori terms. I can come back to some of those. Other themes in here and underlying this is land, and you know, land is all important to Māori, but I think in a different way to Europeans. It's not seen as a commodity. And I'll just say in the film, when it comes to the part of giving birth, what's really important to Māori is the placenta. And in Māori terms, the name for placenta is whenua. Whenua. The name for land is whenua, exactly the same. And in the film, the tohunga there, Praiti, buries the whenua of the baby that's born, and she says, "Te whenua, the placenta, ki te whenua, to the land." So there's that theme running through here. I said it was complex, and you know, I'll try and keep it simple. But there is the theme of religion, and in particular, one of the Māori religions started by the chief Tuakiri, who started a church which was a variant on Christianity called ringatu. Ringa is your hand, tu is upright, so the upright hand. And you might have seen in the prayers they finish with the upright hand, and we can come back to that theme. There's also the theme of the role of women, and all of those things around childbirth and the importance of children in all of these things. And then I guess the other one, and I've probably missed some out, is this notion of really hiding your true identity in someone who is born with Māori blood, but having a mother that chooses to hide that identity, and basically scrub her white, which is yes, just like Michael Jackson. Yeah, and many people in New Zealand with Māori and European ancestry, many of them actually denied if there was Māori ancestry in their families. They are only starting, or in the last 20 years, started to admit and started to seek that ancestry. So it's been quite a revelation for families going back in Māori terms, whakapapa, genealogy, people really learning who they are. So Witi has managed to weave quite a lot of complex themes and into this film, and you know, there are more things that sit in there, and we can come back to that. I just, if I can, I just want to deviate. Apologies, Merv, to a little bit about Tuakiri, and I just want to mention one film that you'll find hard to get, but it is called The Tuakiri Trail, and it was made in 1927 by a filmmaker called Rudel Hayward. And Rudel Hayward traced the part of the journeys of Tuakiri, who had caused trouble on the East Coast, and was for his efforts shipped well offshore to the Chatham Islands. He escaped there and came back. He fought on the East Coast, and many of the battles he fought were not only against British soldiers, but also against Māori soldiers, particularly from the East Coast. Tuakiri, in European terms, his name was Coots, but Tuakiri is Tekooti, and it's the Tuakiri Trail. You can find reviews of that on the internet. But you know, though, and you'll see a similarity of the opening scenes in this film, of the and I think it was Tuakiri escaped to hide in the Urewera, where this is set, and many of those villages were destroyed in the pursuit of Tuakiri. He actually escaped and was later pardoned for his efforts. But these people in the Urewera, the Tūhoe, paid a heavy price, and so that's really where I see the film starting, and you know, that's and I think the filmmakers would have seen Rudel Hayward, one of New Zealand's very first filmmakers, you know, influencing this particular film. So I'm happy to leave it there, Merv, and we're happy to see where we want to go, and in that sense.
Sure. If I could just add on a bit with the if you will, the genealogy or the whakapapa of Tekooti, and the situation that is being played out with the tohunga, the midwife, because at that time she's practicing. These practices could be interpreted as illegal because of the Tohunga Suppression Act, which, in the interest of the preservation of the health, the furtherance of the health of the Maori people, what they were trying to do was suppress the traditional practice of medicine, amongst other things, casting it as superstitious, as if you will, almost kind of pagan-like. But there is also an underlying political theme as well. because, if you will, one of the successors to Te Koti is Rua, Kenana, who is also one of these prophets that set up a syncretic religion that melded elements of tradition and Christianity. And what scared a lot of the colonial folks was this kind of blending, this melding of the religious and the political. And therefore, it was not only a health concern or a medical concern, but it was also a political concern as well, that the that Huna Suppression Act was passed.
Okay. I've just got to say this about the film and Whitty's writing is that the advantage of working in fiction is you can shift
Right.
time frames a little. So look, just excuse that and things coming together. Just first to note that Te Koti never wasn't Tūhoi. He came from a tribe called Rongowhakaata around the Gisborne area in the East Coast, and you know, he came, but this film is really focused on Tūhoi, called by an ethnologist the Children of the Mist, because they were inland people. They didn't have a coast. They had access to the coast, but they didn't have a coastline themselves. So, but the thing about Te Koti was that many of the people of Tūhoi and around the Bay of Plenty practiced the Ringatu religion, and still do, still active. If you're in that church, you have to be very patient. The prayers might take you all day, and they're all learned by rote. Nothing comes from the book. So if you want to test your ability in the Māori language, Ringatu is the religion for you. So Te Koti was a prophet in the latter part of the 19th century. Rua more around the turn of the 19th century into the 20th. Another prophet, you know, looking to lead his people, and one of the issues there was health, and so he sought the mix of traditional Māori tohunga, the medicine men, if you like, and so Plaiti really fitted more into his regime, I think, in a time sense. In fact, the Tohunga Suppression Act, I think, came in 1907. So,
okay.
And Rua was arrested about 10 years later, in a really unfortunate thing, but he took his people to the highest part of the land in Tūhoi, a mountain called Maunga Poatu, and set up a village there. And but just if I can come to the Tohunga Suppression Act, because it was promoted by a Māori Member of Parliament, James Carroll, and it was really to, they looked at an issue of people who weren't, if you like, true tohunga, and who were and to really reduce their impact. But Praiti, the character played by Whirimako Black, and just to note that Whirimako is from Tūhoe. They have a slightly different dialect to others, so you can always tell a Tūhoe speaker, but they're absolute masters of Te Reo Māori, and Whirimako is one of those, aside from being a good actor and an excellent singer. She was brought up in those Tūhoe traditions, so she wasn't just playing that character. She knew that, you know, what from her, probably from her grandmother, those practices and so on, and how to look after women in that circumstance. So, you know, this film is true in that sense, but so she would be, as in many Māori words, the tohunga is not gender specific, so it can be men and women, and you'll see also rangatira, the chiefs, equally men and women, and so on through this film. So yes, just if I can jump to sort of what happened to Rua when he set up this community. It was terrible. The community was invaded by police. This is 1916, and he was accused of sedition. And you'll see this sort of running through in terms of discouraging Māori to join the war effort, and at the First World War. Māori did go though in numbers, and that's a whole nother story, but an interesting one. Just if I could say this one thing on the side, if there's ever going to be a great historical film in Aotearoa, it's probably going to be the story of Tuakiri. It contains so many elements, but Sir Peter Jackson or Taika Waititi, although Taika's of that area, are probably not going to do it, but hopefully someone will. I was hoping in my lifetime that someone might take up that challenge in terms of the film. That's not to say that Rudel Hayward did a bad job. He just did a more limited job. I think there's more. Yes, there's a question of where are the female panelists. Absolutely. Can I just say this, that my daughter would have been a much better participant in this in terms of Māori issues. She could deal with these things. But her role as chief executive of Ngā Taonga Sound and Vision, what was the Film Archive and other archives, has her unfortunately rather busy at the moment and unable to participate. So I apologise for that. She would be much more adept than I am in those matters, and the role of women. I mean, you would see Praiti was a woman of mana, of significant standing, and you know, a specialist in her field, which was common, but of course mistrusted by European medicine, and misunderstood, really, you know, in terms of what she could have done in terms of the young girl who was taken into the hospital and miscarried. She could have significantly helped in that circumstance, and so you get another theme in this film, which I will call utu, the Māori term utu, which some take to mean revenge, but in fact is better translated as reciprocity, and the reciprocal of the baby born to the young girl who was in the village that was sacked, and the baby born to the lady of the house that hid her genealogy, or her mother did. You know, the baby lost in the first pregnancy was in essence replaced by the baby born later, and that, of course, Palaiti took that baby with her, and that started to in my view, in reciprocity, to balance to put the world back in balance, I guess, in that reciprocal arrangement. Sorry, that was a bit longer than I meant to take.
Wanted to ask Jean to talk about the women panelists,
Right.
female panelists.
Before I do, I just want to back up to what Maury was just talking to you about, because in the movie you see the two pregnancies, the young woman who miscarries in the Western hospital, and then the birth of the child that we see at the end, with, you know, through the traditional medicine. And just want to comment that the Tohunga Suppression Act was ostensibly to protect the health of Maori people, with this idea that traditional medicine wasn't as good as Western medicine. So I think there was a message in the book and in the film that they ain't necessarily so. As far as the female panelists, we were tallying up, I think we contacted 9 Maori women, women that we know personally, and then several of them, as they graciously declined, referred us to people that they thought might agree. We talked to women who we thought would be able to address the issues that were raised in the film. And I think we felt that we encountered an overabundance of modesty from people who just said, you know, I'm probably not the best person for this. And while we thought we had found some women who could speak to the issues from a female perspective, we couldn't convince them that that they were expert enough to do it.
Yeah, there was, I think also interesting was that for a couple of them, a couple of the women are academics, Maori academics in 2 different universities. And when I talked with them, their response was, you know, I'm glad somebody's doing that, because there's some really important issues here that said that, you know, that kaupapa really needs to be examined, but it ain't me. They felt really uncomfortable in plumbing those depths. So it wasn't for lack of trying. In terms of the response, who do I identify with? I personally, it's got to be the Tohunga, Whirimaka Black character, because as Māori stated, this is a powerful woman, not that I think of myself as powerful, but I would like to have that kind of that degree of mana, that degree of authority, that degree of expertise. And I think one of the things to understand about Tohunga, they were not just medical, Tohunga are not only medical experts or health experts. You could be a Tohunga as an expert in carving, an expert in tattooing, expert in animal husbandry and farming, etc. In the sense that title, Tohunga, really is about expertise, and not the kind of a degree by mail kind of expertise. It's like that kind of intimate and long-term practice of the art and the craft, and that's the kind of person I aspired to be. Mark, can I ask you, as far as the symbols, was there anything symbolic about her having a shotgun?
Maury, it looks like you're still muted.
Yeah, no, sorry. I saw that. I'll just say this: I don't know what it is about Tūhoe and shotguns, but I think all of Tūhoe have shotguns. And can I just deviate to one of the other characters of Tūhoe society who's been part of the festivals and institutes, and that's Tamaiti. Now, Tamaiti is he's a tohunga. He's tūturu throughout, and ended up being arrested for activities up at Maunga Poatu. And part of those included his single shotgun, which eventually he was arrested for possessing. And one time I came on to the marae in Tūhoe. I came on with the chief of police, various ministers of the crown, and Tommy was there with his shotgun. Whereas others will have a taiaha, a staff, or a toki, an axe, or something like that, Tami and others would carry a shotgun. So it seems to me, if you're Tūhoe, you had a shotgun, and so, you know, she would, it would be part of her tools of trade. And you know, if you go there today, they all have shotguns, and of course, you know, they're living to an extent off the land, in the forests and so on. So I think, you know, that's you know, so it's not for self-protection. It's you know, it's it is about survival and just you know, because they lived off birds, and you know, I'm one of the coastal people living off fish and so on, but in these inland forests, you know, without land mammals, birds are the important part of the diet, along with eels out of the stream. So that, I think, is the how I view the significance of the shotgun. But part of the charges against Tamaiti was possessing this, you know, again, Rua gets charged with sedition and Tami initially on terrorism charges. I doubt there's a terrorist in the country who could call himself a terrorist having a single shotgun.
You want to read that tomorrow?
Okay. So someone's got a question. Can you give an overview of what the law against Maori medicine was at the time of the film, and how are things different today? I mean, Murph touched a little bit on the Tohunga Suppression Act. That's been repealed though, right?
Yeah, still go on? Yeah. The Tohunga Suppression Act, you know, they were looking to try and persuade Māori society to move more towards European medicine, and you know, a number of the Māori members of Parliament were in fact medical doctors, and you know, there were issues of various epidemics, and by the turn of the century, the Māori population had dropped to the point where some of you will be familiar with the term, the smoothing the pillow of the dying race, and that was in fact apt, and there was the possibility or the thought that Māori population would die out. In fact, now it's very healthy. It is increasing, but not nearly at the pace that immigration is changing the dynamics here. But look, a number of these areas, like the Urewera, where the Tūhoi live, they would have a very small number of doctors, and even less in terms of nurses. In the times of Carol, Apirananata, Peter Buck, and others, Maui Pomari, they were pushing hard to try and improve Māori health statistics, and also get more Māori trained in medicine. But Tohunga continued to be trained, but it was rigorous training for them. And as Merv said, Tohunga is really just a specialist in someone who knows in the depths of some matters. So they continued, but you know, the impacts of colonization, the ravages of flu, smallpox, and other diseases made it quite difficult. So today, health statistics aren't great for Māori. There's still a lot of work to be done, but you know things are changing. The use of traditional medicines continues, and there's certainly been an awakening of the of those uses, but with the reduction of areas in original forest cover and medicinal flora and fauna, harder to find, to get, and also training people in the use of those. But I think there's more tolerance now for that, for those, but it's still an issue. Just how do the two fit together, and what beliefs there are. There are issues today, even not so much, I think, in Māori community with COVID-19, but in the Pacific Island community, that's they're in very large numbers in Auckland, in New Zealand, from many of the islands, some of those communities struggle with traditional understanding and the modern context, and we need to do more work in terms of how we communicate really understandings that will cross those cultural divides.
I should also add, Maury, that as far as international conventions like the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples have acknowledged and recognized the right of Indigenous peoples to continue in the traditional cultural practices, including that of traditional medicine. And some of the folks who have been really movers in that arena have been from New Zealand, with Aroha Mead and her work with the UN and other folks. I should also add that we had many years ago some discussions at a roundtable around traditional healers and their role in preserving biodiversity. And we had traditional healers from Malawi. And there was a big discussion amongst the folks from the Pacific and from the United States, and also the folks from Malawi, because the traditional healers from Malawi were recognized by the government in the sense they were card-carrying, government-certified traditional healers. And there was a real debate amongst the folks in the Pacific and in the United States as to whether or not that was the rightful purview of the nation state to accord such recognition to traditional healers.
I guess I shouldn't get too straight off, but the business of bioprospecting.
Yes.
Out behind me here, probably within sort of 50 meters of this house, there are probably 100 different traditional medicines to be gathered. Also birds, which are also part of traditional medicine. They're off limits now because you're not allowed to harvest those things, even culturally in that sense. But that's another matter. But you know, the Paraiti character would be particularly for older people, using the shotgun would be used to, behind me here I might be interrupted by the kereru, the wood pigeon. They're nice and fat at the moment, and they were used medicinally, particularly for older people. But of course that can't be done today. So, you know, these matters are changing, coming back, and you know, I think people are understanding now and investigating, you know, on the basis of traditional knowledge, you know, things that are a good source of prospecting for farmers, either nutraceuticals or pharmaceutical type applications. But that's getting a bit far away from the film, I think. But it isn't in another way, because that's precisely what she was doing. She knew how to gather things, on which side of the tree to take them, the nature of the leaves that you took, and all of those things, you know, and that would be, you know, long handed down through the family, precious knowledge, quite a bit of that's been lost, but an amount that survived.
So we've got a couple of minutes before we close up, and as far as my final thoughts, as I stated at the opening, I love these films for the stories they tell, the stories that they tell kind of overtly, the ones that are simmering beneath the surface, and those that are, you've got to dig way deep, but it's there. I love Fidimako Black. I think she's a terrific actor, and for you all who have not enjoyed her music, she's got 3 or 4 or perhaps more CDs that are available, and the one in which she sings the traditional Cole Porter type songs in Te Reo is really, you know, in the Māori language, is really outstanding. I highly recommend that.
Yeah, I think if I can add to that just a little, that she also worked with a number of Māori musicians, and also bringing back traditional instruments, the flutes and so on, which you know, were maintained there. The taonga puoro, and those sorts of things. Can I just too acknowledge one other person, and that's the actor Nancy Brunning, who you might not have noticed, but she was Huriana. My daughter's Huniana, but she's Huriana, And Nancy died of cancer just a little while ago. So I just like to acknowledge her. It was good to see her in that film, and all of the others, and acknowledge Witi. Witi might have done so much, you know, for not just literature and for Māori into the mainstream, but and he's still very actively writing there, and he's always great fun to be with, and you know, he's his legacy is just enormous in these things. So, you know, this what might have looked like and on the face of it a simple story is you know, there's so many themes and things wound into that in a short talk it's hard to do it justice.
I'd like to very quickly respond to the question from Denise on the red hair of the young girl that had a discussion with Selena and Jessa before this program started. This story of friends of mine from college years. He is a country boy from Idaho. She was from Tonga. She was about as Tongan looking as you possibly could imagine a Tongan look. And he was about as country Idaho boy as you possibly could draw. And they had a child, and that child was blonde haired, blue-eyed, and she had that burden of having to respond to the question. It was constantly put to her, who are you babysitting for? And I thought that one of the things that was significant about that closing scene with the child was that it's the blood, if you will. It's the DNA, it's the chromosomes, and it's up to the good Lord above how they come together. And so if there's a kind of a message there, it's that look, looks can be deceiving. The phenotype and the genotype are completely different. It's how those genes are expressed, and we got to remember that, because ultimately, at the very core, we're all human beings.
Absolutely. These are some very important thoughts, especially leading into a world in which we're having more and more different cultures in different regions, and sometimes our assumptions aren't necessarily correct. So that's a great reminder. Thank you so much, Merv. Do either of you have any other final thoughts before we wrap up? Jean, would you like to say anything?
Sure. Real quickly, because I'm watching the clock tick down here. I know we don't have a lot of time, but just to weigh in on the little red-haired girl, there is an indication during the film where the mother, who's pretending to be, you know, the maid, she says how she doesn't fit in. She no longer fits with Maori or with white culture. There's some indication that there may have been some mixed ancestry But of course, the husband that we never see is white. And, you know, in terms of the question is about the gene pool and how did she become so blonde. But I think what really strikes me is for all the sorrow, all the angst of the young woman who's bleaching her skin, and all the concern she has about bringing this child to term, that her husband will see this baby and this will reveal all her secrets. In the end, that child looks very white with red hair, and you know, she could have taken a different path, and you know, things could have wound out very differently for her. You know, what she was expecting would happen if she had the child and her husband saw the child isn't necessarily what she was anticipating. So again, you know, you put all these issues into a narrative form, and the authors and the filmmakers give us lots to think about.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for letting us bring this conversation to our audience. Thank you everybody who was able to attend today. Jean, would you like to do a final shout out to all of our amazing sponsors that let us be able to bring this film to everybody?
Absolutely. And again, thanks to the museum for supporting us for so many years and providing this platform, to the Denver American Indian Commission who partners with us, to Mile High Behavioral Healthcare, and to Kubo Jazz. And to all our attendees, come back October 14th. We'll kick off the Indigenous Film and Arts Festival. And a special thanks to Maury, who's been on our board for many, many years, and always willing to share his knowledge and expertise. Thanks for joining us and being part of the panel.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you again so much for joining us today. As Jean said, keep an eye out on both of our websites for the next part of the series, and we're looking forward to it. Thank you all.